All right, so one of the things that I've noticed when I edit the photos that I took on my recent trip to Utah using my iPhone 15 Pro Max is that while I have a lot of flexibility in how I edit the photos, I wouldn't say I have as much latitude as I do when I edit the raw files of one of my full frame photos that I take with one of my Sony cameras. Now, that's not to say that I can't get great results because I've actually been really impressed with the photos that I edited from this trip. Still, my impression is that you really need to show a bit more restraint when using Lightroom's editing tools, especially when you're working with Apple ProRAW files. So for this video, I'm going to walk you through an editing workflow for one of the photos that I took of balanced rock at Arches National Park using my iPhone. And I feel like it's been kind of a long time since I did a good old editing video, so I'm excited for this one. And I will be using Lightroom and Photoshop on my desktop, but you can replicate the entire process using Lightroom and Photoshop on your iPad, with the exception of just one slider. So let's dive right in. All right, so here we are in Lightroom on the desktop. And before we dive into the editing workflow, I want to talk to you just really quickly about a compositional technique. And you probably already know this, but it's always good to get a reminder because this has to do with how you frame your subject. Because in scenes like this, where you have these vast expanses, sometimes it's as important to think about how to frame your subject as figuring out what your subject is. So let me show you what I mean. Let's start with this really basic photo. I don't care what anybody says. This is a really basic photo of balanced rock. I basically stood there, I lifted my iPhone and I took the photo. Didn't really pay much attention to how I framed it. And as you can see, it's pretty boring. And that's okay. You know, a lot of the photos I take are boring. Sometimes I take the photos like this to use, as is the case here, as an educational thing. So that's what I did. I wanted to show you what a boring photo looks like. If we go over to this one, same thing. The reason why I want to use this photo is because even when you have a really great subject and really great light, like this is at sunset, beautiful light, still, it's a flat photo because I'm basically just standing there and not really paying much mind to how I frame the subject. Now, if I move over to this image here, now we're starting to have a lot of fun. So, you know, yeah, this is my primary subject, this cluster of rocks, but I thought it would be a lot more fun if I could surround it and frame it with this really gnarly tree. I think that that to me is a much more interesting composition than if I were to just stand in front of the tree and frame this up, kind of like I did over here. Like basically it's just balanced rock with some other rocks surrounding it and a bunch of shrubs in the foreground. Great light, cool subject, boring composition. So here is just one more example that I want to show you. I use this in another video here, but basically using the shrubs here in the foreground, getting really low and shooting up. So it's as if this is almost framing these two arches over here, which makes the composition a lot more interesting. So let's actually go on to the photo in question that I want to edit. And it's this one here. So you can see here that I changed things up here where first I arranged it so balanced rock is kind of higher above than this rock over here. And I also found a way to use the shrubs to almost frame the bottom portion of the rock. So you have a lot of interesting things going on. You have this almost like a line going this way, pointing to the rock. And then you also have this rock here being flanked by the shrub. So to me, this is a lot more interesting of a composition. And it's kind of what I want to work on as I edit this photo. So to start, the first thing that I want to do is crop the photo. And I can either click on the crop icon over here, or I can press C on my keyboard. And now I am in crop. Also with the most recent update to Lightroom, the geometry tools are here as well. They used to be in the regular edit mode, but now they're in the crop mode. So here's what I'm going to do. The first thing I'm going to do is crop in from the bottom because I feel like we do have a lot of this kind of excessive space that we don't need. So I'm going to tighten this up by bringing it up kind of like this. I'm also going to rotate it just around there. And let's bring it over so we almost kind of have balanced rock on the right third, this rock here on the left third. And let's press C to see what the composition looks like. And it's actually pretty good, but I'm going to go back and kind of juke it over just a little bit, kind of like over there. That's looking good. Now, you might notice one thing, at least I noticed one thing right away, and it bothers me a lot. And that has to do with how close the top of balanced rock is to the top of the frame. And it creates this tension. And that's something that I try to avoid. Now, that's where Photoshop will come in. I'll show you that in a little bit, but that's just something I want you to pay attention to when you are framing your composition with your subject, is to ensure that you have enough breathing room so that it doesn't look like it's just almost jutting to the edge of the frame. All right, now we can have fun with editing. So I'm going to walk you through how I generally edit my landscape photos, and it's mostly the same workflow. Let's go to the editing tools here. And so the first thing you should do if you're using an iPhone to take photos and you have the Pro RAW format enabled is I highly recommend going to the profiles here and making sure that Pro RAW is the profile that's selected. It should be by default, but the thing is, a lot of times I've heard from photographers who use iPhones and they import their photos into Lightroom and they say it looks terrible. And the reason usually for that is they start off with something like Adobe Landscape. And so you can see here how you can certainly work with the sliders here to fix it. But imagine if this is the first time you're looking at the photo, it kind of looks really dark and underexposed. So I do recommend using the Apple Pro RAW profile. It generally gives you a much better starting point. All right, the next thing that I do almost right away is get a custom white balance because this is a raw file. All I need to do is press W, or I can go under color here and click on the dropper. I'm gonna click on it, and I'm gonna click on an area that should be kind of a neutral gray, so something right around there. And you can see that it actually got rid of a bit of a color cast and add a little bit more warmth to the photo. For the next thing that I do, this is something that I'm gonna create a separate video on because this panel is in and of itself, it could be a bit complex, but there's really only one slider that I use here. So if you scroll down in the color section here, under the color grading section here, there is a color calibration panel. Now, if you don't see this, that's because it's hidden by default. So if you want to view this, you'll go to the ellipse over here and you'll make sure that show color calibration is checked. When you check that, you'll see this panel over here. Now, again, I mentioned that this panel can have its own video because it's super powerful and it acts differently than, say, the color mixer. And really, the easiest way for me to explain it is that with the color calibration sliders, you can see over here we have red, green, and blue. When I make adjustments to these sliders, they adjust every single pixel in your photo. And so the one slider, though, and this is really a magical slider, is the blue primary saturation slider. You want to be careful with how much you use this slider, especially with mobile photos, because in the beginning, I told you how some sliders can be a bit heavy-handed when working with Pro RAW. This is one of them, but it's still really powerful. And I also mentioned that there's one slider that you can only use on Lightroom on the desktop because it's not available on mobile. This is the slider. So watch this. When I take the blue primary saturation slider and I bring it all the way out, I mean, it almost makes every color in the photo look better. It just looks more natural and more vibrant and poppy. But at 100%, this is a bit too strong for me. In photos like my Sony RAW files, I can get away with pushing this to 100% and it'll look great. But I find with the iPhone photos, you really want to bring it to 0 and then slowly build out. And so really right around here, yeah, about 35, this is starting to look really good. And there's a little eye icon here. So if you click on it, you can see the effect disabled. And when you let go, you can see the effect re-enabled. In fact, I'm going to bring it out a little bit more now. The other global edit that I make before I start doing my local edits is I scroll down and I make sure that the lens correction option is enabled. So that's really the only thing that I do in terms of global edits at this point. When I do landscape edits, I generally like to treat the sky and the landscape, the foreground or the subject, independently, because things that I want to do to edit the sky, I don't necessarily want for the foreground and vice versa. So let me show you how I do that. So the first thing that you'll want to do is use one of the adaptive masks, which you can see over here, where Lightroom will automatically detect the sky. Now, I've created a separate video that I'm going to link to at the end of this particular video, where I go into how I have kind of a secret method of getting an even better sky selection. In that video, I also show you one of the things that I do is I create a preset. So I can save the step. I don't need to spend time now. So I have this preset here called Better Sky Mask. I'm going to click on it And when I go to the mask panel here, you see now I have a nice clean mask that was automatically created. And so with that mask selected over here, pretty much one of the only things I do usually to my sky is I go to dehaze. And dehaze is like, it's just a magic tool for sky. So I'm going to start building in, and you can see how, as I do, see how rich the sky gets. I mean, it just looks beautiful. And so you can see if I click just how flat the sky looks here, but with just one slider. I mean, it is great. You don't want to go like that though. Please, 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 for the love of God, don't do this. Dehaze is one of those sliders that is really good in small doses. So I'm going to undo that and bring us back to where we were. And it's funny because I undid it and it almost looks flat. So I have to click here just to remind myself what the actual sky looks like without any dehaze. So here, okay, this looks good. The other thing that I'm going to do is go up here to point color because I want to bring out a little bit more of that blue in the sky. So I'm going to click on the dropper here. I'm going to click on a blue area here. And what I'll do is enable this visualize range here, which will turn the sky grayscale except for the area that's being affected. And so for the most part, what I selected here with these range tools is good. But what I also will do is adjust the hue so we include a little bit more of the blue in the sky. I'm also going to adjust the saturation range here so we include a little bit more of that as well. And with my selection dialed in, now I can adjust the hue and the saturation. So I'm going to take the hue slider, bring it to the right to adjust the hue. And I'm also going to adjust the saturation to make it a little bit punchier. And so you can see if I click on the eye icon, the changes we made. So I'm just looking up here in the blue area. So you can see here, that's the original blue in the sky. Then we add a little bit more punch. Now I can go ahead and disable that grayscale mask, and you can see we now have our sky good to go. All right, so that's all I wanted to do with the sky. Now I want to make some adjustments to the foreground. And I find the easiest way to do that is to simply go to the sky mask, click on the ellipse here, and then go to duplicate and invert. So basically here, now we have the foreground selected. And if you want, you can click here, click rename, and call this foreground mask, just so you know which one's which. And so for the foreground, really for this, all I want to do is add a little bit more detail. So I'm going to zoom in here, and here, I mean, that's beautiful because again, this is a 48 megapixel image. I used the main camera. So if I go really quickly to the info view, I just want to show you right here. We cropped in a bit, so the resolution's a little bit off, but we are working with a 48 megapixel image, which is awesome. Let's go back to the mask view here. And what I was going to do here while I zoom in is go to the effects panel, and I'm just going to use the texture and clarity sliders here. So for texture, I like to be zoomed in so I can see the effect. And again, you don't want to go too far because you're going to get this kind of overly crispy photo. So start at 0 and just slowly build it out. And then the same thing with clarity, somewhere right around here. Clarity also, I like to have the full image to see here. And so that's looking good here. What I might do though for the foreground mask is add a little bit of a saturation boost. I wouldn't want to adjust the saturation of the sky because it's already pretty punchy. So I will go ahead here and just add a little bit more of a saturation boost, just a little bit like that. And so with that, I've done my localized edits. Now I'm going to go back to the edit panel here. And what I want to now do is fix a little bit of the tone. You can see we have some areas that we're clipping in the shadows and blowing out highlights. Not too worried about it though. So what I will do is open up the black point just a little bit, open up the shadows just a little bit as well. Again, you can see I'm not really too worried about making sure that I get rid of these warnings. With the highlights, I'll bring that down a little bit. I'll also bring the white point in just a little bit there. And now we're looking really good. Again, you can see here without those edits and then with them. And if it looks a little bit flat, that's okay. I kind of go for that because what I do after that is apply a tone curve adjustment. And if you've watched any of my videos, you know that that means an S curve. So I have a video all on the tone curve. I'll put a card right here so you can see that. But all I'm going to do is open up the highlights a little bit, drop the shadows so you can see we get this really nice, rich contrast here. And then let's see what we want to do with the midtones here. So kind of right around there. Looks really good. And that's pretty much what I want to do right now in Lightroom. You can see if I press the backslash key, that is the original photo. And then here is our edit. I mean, it just looks beautiful. It looks tasteful. Nothing looks over the top. It just, I mean, I don't know. It's amazing that I took this photo with a device that I used to call my parents and just browse the internet with. It really is amazing. But like I mentioned, there is a bit of tension up here, and I also do want to add a little bit of a warm glow to the photo that I can't do as effectively in Lightroom. And so that's where Photoshop will come in. But before we jump in, just give me like 30 seconds to tell you about my course called Lightroom Everywhere. This is a course I am super proud of because I genuinely love Lightroom. I've used this version of Lightroom since it came out, and there is no other course like it that dives as deeply into using this app on your desktop, your iPhone, your iPad, and it will teach you how to manage your entire library on all your devices using Lightroom Cloud. So it's got over 9 hours of easy-paced lessons, and you don't even have to take my word for it. Go to the product page and you'll see the testimonials from actual students who I'm so grateful for. So if you want to learn more, I'll leave a link in the description below. And again, this is all you need to know to learn everything about Lightroom. So with that, let's jump back in. All right, so to get a photo to Photoshop, it's actually super easy. All you need to do is right click on the photo and then click on Edit in Photoshop, and that will load it. And so you can see here we have our image in Photoshop. When you send a photo using Lightroom on the desktop to Photoshop, it will automatically send it as a TIFF file. And I bring that up because if you are primarily an iPad user and you do that, where you send a photo from Lightroom to Photoshop on your iPad, it'll send it as a PSD file. So just one little thing to keep in mind. One's not necessarily better than the other. Some people are more team PSD, some people are more team TIFF, but you should know that. So, all right, we got the photo in Photoshop, and really the first thing that I want to do is address that tension over here because it's been bothering me the entire time that I've been editing the video. So what I do is I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and then I'm going to go to the crop tool here, and I've covered this before. I think it's one of the best features. It's called Generative Expand. What I'll do is I'll make sure though that original ratio up here is selected because I want to keep the ratio of the image. And I'm going to click from the center bumper here at the top, and I'm just going to increase it just a bit, not that much. I'm not looking to fundamentally change the composition, but I want to give a little bit more breathing room. Here's the key though. With this fill dropdown, you want to make sure that Generative Expand is selected, and then we're going to click on the check mark. And boom, there we go. We have that. To me is just the right amount of space from the top of balanced rock to the top of the frame. You can see here we have other options. You always get 3 different variations, but really that first one is totally fine. Actually, let me see this one. That one's better because this top one here, you can see how it created a little divot in the top of balanced rock, whereas this one keeps it nice and straight. I'm also scanning the entire edge of the frame that I expanded, which is really just the left, the top, and the right. Everything looks good, so I'm happy with this. The next thing that I want to do is apply a little bit of a glow, and the way that I love to do this is to use a technique called Orton Glow, or the Orton effect, and I have videos on this as well. It's something that, again, just like the dehaze slider, in small amounts, it's really effective because it gives the image just a little bit more of a punch. And it's actually really easy to do, but you need to use Photoshop for this. So the way that I'm going to do this is I first want to create a new layer of the 2 stamped layers. And to do that, I'm going to press Command Option Shift E. On Windows, that would be Control Alt Shift E. And you can now see that I have this layer here. You can go ahead and delete these other layers if you want, but I'm just going to keep them here for now. And with this layer created here, I'm going to right click and then go to Duplicate Layer and then click OK. That's the next thing you want to do. And with this layer duplicated, you'll go to Filter, then you'll go to Blur, and you'll select Gaussian Blur. Now, the strength of Gaussian Blur, it varies. Different people tell you different things. Like they say, oh, you should match the radius to the megapixel of the sensor that you used. Honestly, I just play around with it. So, somewhere around 34 to 40 is fine. Let's go ahead and click OK here. And now the image is blurred. Go ahead and select this tool here so we're out of the crop mode. And here's the key. With the blur layer selected, I'll go ahead and click on the blending modes here, and I'm going to go to soft light. You can hover over these. Some people like multiply, which gives you a very strong effect. I personally find soft light to be the most balanced. Let's go ahead and zoom in a bit here so we can see more of the image. And let's also move this bar up here. The key here, like I said, it's the same with the dehaze slider. You want to drop that opacity big time. So with this layer selected, bring the opacity to 0 and then slowly just build it in. I'm not looking for anything over the top, but just something that gives it a bit of a soft glow and a boost to the colors in a tasteful way. And this actually looks great. You can see this is without Orton, this is with Orton. It's a very subtle but very powerful addition to the workflow. So now I'm good to go. I'm going to go ahead and click on File and then click on Save. And now you'll have some options in terms of how the TIFF file is saved. And if you kind of want to maximize image quality, if you really want to have this huge TIFF file, then click on None for image compression. You can also choose the type of layer compression you want if you want to preserve your layers. I'll keep this on here just to show you how the file size is impacted. And then I'm going to go ahead and click on OK. Here you'll be warned that including layers will increase the file size, and it will. If you don't want to see this dialog anymore, just click this Don't Show Again. I'll go ahead and click on OK. And you can see that the file is saved, but watch this. If I go to Lightroom here and I go to the grid view here, you can sit here and wait until the end of time and you will not see that photo appear. And there's a reason for that, because even though you saved the image in Photoshop, Lightroom will not re-import the file until this document is actually closed. So when you go to File, you'll want to select Close after you save it. And now if I go to Lightroom, you'll see, there we go. It's importing from Photoshop. So Lightroom will import the photo and it will also stack it with the original one. You'll see right there. Now it's stacked because you have the 2 over here. I don't want that. I want the images to be unstacked. So I'm going to right click and then go to Ungroup Stack. You can now see here is our original DNG file, and then over here is the TIFF file. And just to show you, let's go to the info view. This DNG file is 82 megabytes. This was the 48 megapixel image that we took with the iPhone 15 Pro Max and its main camera. The TIFF file is a whopping 823 megabytes. So just something to keep in mind if you are using Lightroom to sync your entire library is this will take a lot of space. So my recommendation is if you want to manage your space effectively, make your edits to this TIFF file over here, export it as a JPEG, and then re-import that and then delete the TIFF file. You'll have more than enough image data to share on social media or print. And this way you can always come back and recreate the TIFF file if you want, but it does take a lot of space. So with that, there are just a few more things that I want to do globally to the photo. So the first thing that I'm going to do is add sharpening. Sharpening is pretty much one of the last things that I do. And so you can see under the detail panel here, we have our sharpening tool. So the way that I work with sharpening is I like to zoom in to 100% over here, just so that I can see the area of the image that I want to sharpen. And then I press and hold on the Option key or the Alt key on Windows while dragging sharpening. This will convert the image to a grayscale, and it makes it easier for me to see the effect of the sharpening. So that looks good here. And then I zoom out, and with masking, same thing, press and hold on the Option or Alt key, and this will remove sharpening basically from any area that's black. I just want the edges of the image to have sharpening applied, so that looks great. The next thing that I want to do is use lens blur. And I did a video on this, which I will share at the end of this video as well, that explains why it's important to use lens blur, especially with iPhone photos, because with iPhone photos, pretty much everything from the foreground to the background is sharp. So what I'm going to do is enable lens blur here. It will estimate the depth and will automatically apply 50%. Now, that's way too strong. I don't need that much. I'm just going to back this off. And you just need a little bit, like even 15%. And you can see how it just adds a really nice soft focus. It almost looks like you have a shallow depth of field. I'm going to go ahead here and adjust the range just to make sure that we have a good plane of focus right around there. And I'm even going to bring the blur amount down even more. You just need a little subtle kick to give it the sense of soft focus, almost like you were using a wide aperture. So it almost looks like you have this shallow depth of field here where the background is nice and sharp. And then finally, let's go back up here and apply a vignette. So vignette is under the effects panel. I'm gonna go ahead here and bring it in just so we draw the eye. Let's bring that midpoint in. Let's also add a full feather. And then I'm going to bring the highlight slider to 100. Look up here in the top left. You can see without the highlight slider, it just gets a bit too dark. So that what that highlight slider does is it preserves some of that highlight information. And so you can see if I press on the backslash key here, this is the edited photo from Photoshop, but without sharpening or lens blur or vignetting applied. And so this is our completed photo. And so basically that's been my workflow as I edited all of my photos from this Utah trip using my iPhone. You can see you can get some really impressive results, especially when you combine the powers of Lightroom with Photoshop, and just make sure that everything you do is tasteful and not over the top. I did mention that I've got 2 videos to share with you, so they're right over here. If you found this video helpful and inspiring, a thumbs up is always appreciated, and be sure to subscribe and click on the bell icon to get notified of all future videos. Thanks a lot, everyone.